The White Bear Micropub on Southbourne Grove is a proud supporter of AFC Bournemouth and sponsor of all departments. Head to the Bear for real ales, locally produced food and plenty of good conversations about the cherries. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk.
Here come the cherries and we're heading for the top of the tree. Bournemouth is a team that's going to show Division 3. Here come the leaders and the scorers and the Saturday, showing how to win the Southern way. So we sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. While you're out there winning, hear the shouting and the singing. We sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. Here come the cherries, here come the cherries, here come the cherries, number one.
Hello and welcome to All Departments. Our Safe as Houses Cherries took a giant step towards remaining in the Premier League for another year with our first ever win at troubled Villa Park. Here to report back on another successful away day is Gary Hawkins. Gary, welcome to All Departments.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm pleased to be here.
It's great to have you on. Now, it wasn't our greatest performance of the season on Saturday, but it was a game that we all probably had down as one where we could take a huge step towards safety, and that was exactly what we did, wasn't it?
It was. That 41 point or that 40 point mark was surpassed. Although we were maybe all a bit confident that 38 would do it, clearly the club wanted us to get to 40, and the Villa game was that turning point. So pleased that we got over the line.
Now, in terms of the team selection, the big news yesterday was the slightly surprising inclusion of Callum Wilson on the bench. You have been, it seems, since you got injured against Stoke at the end of September, predicting that the Villa game, you've been predicting the Villa game would be the one where he came back. You've obviously got an extra affinity for Callum, as you, like my father, are a supporter of Coventry City, but we won't talk about them too much because they've been tumbling down League One recently. But anyway...
Sorry, you cut out just there a bit, Michael.
I think a lot of people thought this was the game where we might see him on the bench, but the story coming out of the squad from Eddie Howe, from Callum himself, was that Glenn Murray was injured in training on Friday and therefore his return was accelerated. I mean, maybe that's true, maybe that was just some little smokescreen, but either way, even before the match kicked off, seeing him back on the bench was just a huge positive for us, wasn't it?
It was, and I've been hopeful for a number of months that the Villa would be the game to come back at. There's a number of personal and Midlands-based reasons for that, because sadly they did send Coventry City down back in 2001 from the Premier League, having spent 34 years in that division. And although Callum would have only been 9 years old at the time, it may well be that he remembers that well as he hit the youth ranks at Coventry City and built his career at that particular club before joining the Cherries. So that was a pivotal point for a return, and thus it happened. And very pleased that was the case. Back in at 9:30 on Saturday morning, as I left home, I had a text from a friend who was staying overnight up in probably the same hotel. I haven't had a chance to talk to him since, but the same hotel as the team. And he had a picture taken with Callum, and he sent it to me. And I asked him immediately back, is he playing? To which the answer was, no, not quite ready. So even at 9:30 this morning, maybe Callum didn't know that he was going to be... 9:30 Saturday morning, maybe Callum didn't know he was going to be on the bench. But it was good that he made it. And although he only got a couple of minutes, it was a poignant moment for him.
Absolutely. A long, dark winter of hard work. He's had some company in that gymnasium or recovery room, treatment table, all those different things they're using. But Max Gradle's back. Callum Wilson looks like he's going to be back to full fitness before the end of the season. Obviously, Tyrone Mings is going to be a bit longer. He's had a setback recently, but yeah, fantastic news. The other big news, which was somewhat overshadowed by Callum's inclusion on the bench yesterday, was Tommy Elphick starting his first game for 7 months. I think the last one he started was against Norwich when we lost at Carrow Road 3-1. And he's appeared a few times. He's played some cup games. He's been on the bench loads recently without making it onto the pitch. He came on for Adam Smith. Obviously, he's got a groin injury which has been troubling him for a while, and he's finally succumbed to it. So Tommy's come back in, and it's gone back to the old League One defence, lining up in the Premier League. And I mean, Adam Smith's had a great season. He's done really, really well. I've been really impressed with him. But I love seeing Tommy in the team. I really like him as a player. He seems like a really good guy. And I missed the goalpost routine at the start of the game. So it was brilliant seeing him back in the team yesterday, wasn't it?
It was, absolutely. And there's another little coincidence there, because travelling up, I listened to your podcast in the car. And it was last week's podcast with Jeff.
I'm glad somebody listens.
Oh, absolutely, and I also listened back to the one that you did with Tommy Elphick, that you'd posted up during the international break, I think. So that was at the end of the first season of the Championship, and he does come across in media interviews extremely well, and he did so in your podcast. So it was good to see him start, and it was expected, most definitely. And the standard back four were back in place. But as you say, Smith has done exceptionally well, and Frano filling in at centre back has done exceptionally well for the team in Tommy's absence.
And the other change was Dan Gosling came in for Ewan O'Kane. I don't think there was much surprise there. O'Kane has had a little flurry in the team, and he's played for his country as well a couple of times recently, but didn't do brilliantly. Well, nobody did really against Manchester City. Eddie
or Spurs, yeah.
Eddie didn't take him off against Man City when people thought he might be replaced by Gosling. He took Gradle off instead, and I think me and Jeff said in the last podcast that we thought, or I certainly did, that the reason that Gradle went off instead of O'Kane was that O'Kane wasn't going to play or start against Aston Villa, and well, so it proved. Dan Gosling's been kind of out of the team for a few games, but he's obviously back in favour now, and I'm not really sure what went on. Maybe he just had a little loss of form, but anyway, I think he's probably going to start our next game, and we'll probably hold on to the shirt, all being well for him, until the end of the season. But the game itself, as we said earlier on, probably wasn't the greatest performance of the season. I'm not really sure if there's a great deal to talk about in the first half, aside from our goal, which came very late. On Match of the Day, the first half must have lasted less than 90 seconds in the highlights. Well, maybe that's up until the goal, which probably doubled the amount of time for the first half. We had a couple of chances, or one that stuck out. Lewis Graben swapped passes with Max Gradle. In fact, Gradle did a nice little flick to play it back into Lewis Graben's pass. Now, this was described in a report that I read as Graben letting fly from 20 yards. When I saw it, I thought that was possibly something of an exaggeration, wasn't it?
Yes, well, I prepared to take some notes, and at half time I didn't need to, because quite literally there were just two key events, as you say, one on 5 minutes, and whilst I discussed it with people around me, I described it as a bit of a grubber, which Guzan made look better than it was. And so yes, that was the only memorable part of the first 44 minutes, apart from a bit of a woeful performance overall, which we may go on to discuss later in terms of the reasons why. But thankfully, the goal came on just in the first minute of added on time in the first half, and again, I get confused about where they find that minute from. There were no injuries, there were no substitutions, yet the referee is almost they're almost mandated to add a minute at the end of the first half, even if it's not relevant. If they did that at the end of the second half, I think we'd be playing 8 or 9 minutes of additional time in some instances. But even so, the corner routine worked. And although there were moans around me as that corner routine was developed, clearly the Jamie Vardy flick for Cook worked well.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit on various platforms today, and somebody's got a clip that they posted up of some of our fans. You can hear them making.
Yes, I was stood next to that person who posted the clip.
Very negative comments about us doing the short corner again. I think Muppets was probably the politest word that was used.
Yes,
and then of course we scored from it. I mean, in terms of the short corner, it was obviously something. I mean, Eddie spoke about it afterwards, that they had planned, had worked on, maybe different little routines. Maybe that one, I don't know. But there'd been 2 or 3 before that. Well, corners is kind of one of my pet subjects in terms of what their actual value and the way that we get excited as fans. And I think as traditional English football fans, the majority of fans seem to want to see the ball, played in to the 6-yard box.
Into the high man.
Yeah. Which can work.
Big guy.
It can work. And it's, we scored directly from a corner this season, of course, Junior Stanislas against United. But, it doesn't always work. And there's the counter argument to that is that by playing the short corner in this kind of tiki-taka Barcelona-esque way, you retain possession. But it's a sort of horses for courses thing, isn't it? Whereas, we have, I certainly don't have anything like the knowledge about how the vulnerabilities of certain teams in certain situations. And so, like everything else, we kind of just need to trust Eddie's judgment in those situations, don't we?
Well, we do, and I think we played to our strengths in that instance. And whilst we scored a classic corner routine goal against Man United as well in that same game when Junior Stanislas scored, it shows the value of corners because 2 goals came from corners. And I don't know if it was you who quoted once about how Mourinho is perplexed about how the English get so excited about a corner being awarded. But goals do come from set pieces as well as open play. So it's an opportunity to prepare a set piece and to score from it. So apart from the 2 Man United goals, the other memorable corner, I think, would probably be Ken Wyn-Jones at Ipswich. And obviously yesterday's one. And however which way they come, at least the ball's in the back of the net.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's was a real joy to watch from our point of view. It was really well rehearsed, or it looked well rehearsed. I mean, Simon Francis took the corner. He doesn't take that many. He does take them sometimes. Matt Ritchie rushed out towards him, and the Villa defence throughout the entire thing actually were very static. They didn't really follow the play. They certainly didn't do enough to stop the ball coming in and block Steve Cook. But he played it short to Matt Ritchie, Simon Francis, and then Ritchie backheeled it back to Simon Francis, who he actually played the ball in quite hard, I noticed, but
very accurately.
Yeah, Cook meanwhile was he was initially picked up by Lescott, but he shook him off, gave him the slip, and kind of spurted towards the corner of the.
Ran across 2 or 3 defenders after Lescott, didn't he, to get in front of them? Yeah,
the near corner of the 6-yard box, and he was still surrounded by Villa defenders. Obviously, he knew what was going to happen. The Villa defenders didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but you don't need to be a genius to think, well, the ball's going to be played into the box now. And the actual finish itself, like you said, was Jamie Vardy against Germany.
Yes.
Obviously, Cook's one was miles better than that, but it was a great goal. And he doesn't score ordinary goals, does he, Steve Cook?
Oh, no, absolutely not. We can all remember being away at Fulham and the cracker he got there. And the overhead kick, was that at Norwich or at Ipswich a couple of seasons ago?
Ipswich, yeah.
Yeah, no, tremendous. I mean, from where we were standing in the Doug Ellis Lower, we couldn't quite see what he'd done. And it was either a Callum-esque finish, a firm side foot into the low into the net, or did he do a Vardy flick then? And we all had to check with each other that, yes, it was a Vardy flick that had nestled the ball into the back of the net. So a great finish from him. And I noticed in watching it back as well, with the benefit of slow motion and TV action replays, that had he dummied the ball or had it bypassed him, I think King was definitely waiting on the penalty spot, a la the Man United corner routine, to pick up the ball if it had eluded Cook as well. So, it was one moment of inspiration in a very dull and lacklustre first half performance, really.
Just going back to the rest of the first half that preceded the goal, all reports that were coming out on Twitter from our fans at the game were negative. In fact, Sam Davis, who does the always excellent Back of the Net podcast, tweeted the following words: "It's not only poor, it's an horrendous spectacle for anyone who has a passion for football." Was it really that bad?
It was sadly poor. I took a friend who lives in Birmingham with me, and he rarely goes to live football matches. And I apologised to him because it was really that poor a game of football. There was no consolation in the fact that he's a Blues fan and Villa were losing at half time. It was just poor. And I've thought about it long and hard since, and the last two performances, and coming back to the podcast with Jeff again, when you asked him the question, do you think that we've been poor or do you think the other teams have been brilliant? And Jeff said, well, a bit of both, really. And I think that with the Villa, you couldn't say they were brilliant. They were equally poor, if not worse. And it has to come down to a word that you mentioned earlier, which was form. And beyond that, I also think there's an element of tiredness. I know they've been away for a break in Dubai, but if you think back to what they achieved through the championship winning season, that was a huge performance through a long season of 46 games. And then beyond that, they were buzzing probably through the whole of the summer. We know for a fact that allegedly Charlie Daniels came back and started doing pre-season training well ahead of everybody else in order to get his fitness levels up. And so they, yes, are playing less games this season than last, but with the way that adrenaline works on a match day and with the effort that they've put in, I think after Swansea, they thought, we've done it, we're there. And they went away to Dubai probably, and they probably told each other, we're not quite there, but you're as good as there. And therefore, the adrenaline just simmers down a little bit on match days. And you lose that little bit of bounce and energy, maybe. You don't want to, psychologically, and you're pumped up enough in terms of the motivation from the manager and the coaches and the teammates. But just the edge only has to come off. 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. If you lose your couple of percentage points off your perspiration element from your adrenaline not being there so much, then that can lead to this dip that we've seen over the last 3 games now, as it is.
Yeah,
but it's forgivable when you turn it into a result anyway, as they did yesterday.
Yeah, and I mean, if we hadn't have done that and we'd have played as poorly as it sounds like we did, certainly in the first half anyway, then there really would have been a pretty fierce reaction from quite a few of our fans. But well, when you win, it never seems quite as bad.
No.
And of course,
Villa never got anywhere near our goal that first half. There was one shot I think that Kieran Richardson smacked over a long way over. And there was one point where Sinclair dodged past Francis and a free kick was given. And that sort of, they were just so poor. They really were. Didn't threaten. And then, well, we'll come on to the second half, I'm sure. But yes.
Yeah, and I mean,
I wouldn't be too negative about it, but though personally, I think it's been a long, hard season and 3 quarters for the whole of that squad. And when you think that the recruitment of Mings and sadly injured, and then Tommy being injured, means that we've not been able to replace those, give anyone a rest and replace key players at key times. And Callum being injured, we've had to bring in King, who's been struggling with an injury. Arthur obviously coming in and out, and if he's not paired up with Sermon, we are most definitely a weaker operation in midfield without that duo there. Then it has been a long season for that type of performance to be sustained.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and psychologically, it's probably been a hugely draining experience. And whereas, I mean, obviously last season would have been draining, but you spoke about adrenaline. The adrenaline rush they must have had regularly last season hasn't quite been the same this season, of course, because we haven't been winning as regularly. There's been times when we've been really struggling, so it's been ups and downs. But I mean, obviously, it looks like we've got across the line with quite a few games to spare. And you mentioned Villa, and we got to half time, and we'd obviously just got the goal. And you could look at our past 3 performances and say, well, we haven't been at our best. We managed to win yesterday, but I mean, it goes without saying that there's no way we would swap with the Aston Villa fans and the season they've had. I mean, Eddie said that the atmosphere in the stadium was toxic yesterday. I mean, I know that they came to life a little bit in the second half, the Villa fans. Eric Black said afterwards, and probably the wisest thing that he could have said was that he had no problem with the Villa fans showing their frustration. Was it really like quite a nasty atmosphere amongst the home supporters?
Well, due to a couple of train issues, I didn't arrive as early as I normally like to do so, and I was shocked when the first time that so I didn't hear all of this animosity. I've seen somewhere that they were booing the players, the Villa fans were booing the Villa players when the team was being read out. Now that is toxic enough to start with, and then so I couldn't quite believe when Bakuna, for instance, got the ball at right back, he was immediately booed, and because I give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes, I thought, oh, maybe they're doing a pew here and it's Bakuna, but it clearly wasn't, and the situation just got worse and worse. You've got to give some of the Villa fans credit because they did deride themselves. When the goal went in, they started singing "We're Going Down" with great velocity. And yes, in the second half, they did try and get behind their team. There were still 31,000 of them there, or well, 28 plus us 3,000 probably. But that's a good following for a club that has had a squad of players that have shown very little on the field through the whole of this season. And I know some of those will be season ticket holders that are obliged to turn up, but I'm sure there's probably 8,000 or 10,000 others that turned up and paid on the day in order to try and get behind their team in some way.
Yeah, it's been a long, slow death for them, and it hasn't just been this season. It's gone on for a few seasons, and now it's come to its rather unpleasant conclusion, or very nearly. They didn't actually get relegated yesterday, but I think everybody knows it's just a matter of time now. And well, I mean, as Eddie said prior to the kick-off, that was not our concern. I mean, he did obviously show and speak about the sympathy he felt for the club after the game, but you couldn't really expect him to do anything else before the game apart from say, well, that's got nothing to do with us. Our job's to win.
Absolutely, totally, yeah. They aren't there because of what happened with the result yesterday. As you said, they're there for probably 5 or 6 seasons of demise. whereby the owner hasn't invested. The managers have been promised and things haven't been delivered. Having said that, of course, they reached a cup final a couple of years ago, having beaten Bournemouth on the way to get there. And Sherwood, for my money, would have probably done a better job in making them fight in some way. But if he again wasn't given the funds in the windows in order to be able to recruit new players, then they wouldn't have been able to do any better than they're currently doing. I've seen Stan Collymore today say that American owners at Liverpool, Arsenal, Man U, Sunderland, and also now at the Villa, they've all failed to deliver on what their promise would have been expected to be.
All Departments is sponsored by the White Bear Micro Pub on Southbourne Grove, the perfect pre- and post-game venue to chat about the game, and only a 25-minute walk to the ground, or there's a bus stop right outside. Wear your AFCB shirt on any match day and receive 30p off each pint. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk.
So, into the second half, they had what should have been a really good chance.
Oh, yeah.
When Kieran Richardson, the ball came in from Jordan Ayew, who I understand was their best player yesterday. It was crossed in low. Richardson was stood about 3 yards from the goal, and it wasn't as if he even swung and missed. The ball just went straight through his legs, didn't it?
He sort of stepped over it, and it was just, you just couldn't miss it. Yeah, he just literally stepped over it, and I've watched it back again in slow motion, and maybe it took a slight deflection off Cook before it came to him, or Boric, I think, actually. Boric maybe didn't get a touch on it, but Boric got missed it enough that Kieran Richardson just didn't see it quickly enough, and it just went under his foot and it was gone. But had they pulled that back and gone 1-1, you don't know what would have happened, but it would have probably, that was not too long after the Villa fans had sort of roused themselves and the chanting from the Holt end, and they were attacking the Holt end at that time, could or should inspire any player of any team that's got those types of fans to sort of raise their game a little bit, and Ayew did at that point. Although Charlie did look a little bit un-Charlie-like in letting him get past so easily. And no, that was a hell of a let-off, really.
Yeah, Charlie's been brilliant this season, but you talked about the players perhaps running out, of a percentage of their adrenaline and maybe just not quite being at their best. And he's been at his best probably in his entire career this year. But I think since Swansea, when he came up against Mo Barrow, who ran him ragged, and then he had difficult time against Tottenham and Man City as well. Whereas prior to that, he'd handled players like, I remember him against Delafeu at Everton when he seemed to be flying, against William when we played Chelsea, and he had them in his pocket. But he's kind of just faded a little bit recently, hasn't he?
He has, and I think it does go. But we all know that they've come from League One. A lot of these players, they've raised their game consistently over the last 3 or 4 years. They've punched above their weight in terms of the fact that they have to prove to themselves as well as to everyone else that they're Premier League players, and it's a fine line. And the slightest of mistakes can get exploited by the Premier League opposition at this level. And I think Charlie's done exceptionally well to sustain the form that he's had. And it's not unexpected that, it's acceptable to a point that he's going to lose a little bit of form, and that's where he's currently at.
I just wanted to ask you about Max Gradle as well. He's come back into the team and played really well, and his return against Watford and subsequently had another really positive impact just on the atmosphere around, I think, the team and certainly the fans. And he came straight. He kind of came in a flash. There wasn't any under 21 games or anything for him, and he played well in the first few games. He scored a goal, and he's been doing really well. He seems to have gone a little off the boil recently. I know that they come back on adrenaline, which seems to be our favourite word this evening. But after waiting for so long, and then they play those first 2 or 3 games, and it must be so thrilling to get back amongst it, because there clearly isn't anything else in their lives that can match the experience of being on the pitch, winning, scoring, all that sort of thing. And but then I think he's also faded a bit the last couple of games, and Mark Pugh came on for him just before the hour mark yesterday. How was he yesterday?
Again, slightly anonymous, apart from the little layoff for Graben in that first sort of 5 minutes. He tried a couple of things down the left, sometimes didn't get a clean dribble on it, or slipped a bad pass inside, and it just wasn't coming off for him. And it can be alleged that the quality of Villa brought down our standards, but we've seen through the Championship where we've played poorer teams and our standards haven't slipped. We have shone brightly in order to overcome those poorer teams, and that's what should have happened against the Villa. And really, what do I know? But Max again may have been guilty of that team situation whereby the great goal at Swansea, the adoration that followed at Swansea, and the achievement of the goal of surviving the Premier League and qualifying as a Premier League squad player for next season, all of that culmination after Swansea probably has just lowered his adrenaline rush and energies for these last few games.
Yeah, I think
just
we'll
slightly off it.
Yeah. And that's understandable, and he'll get hopefully a full pre-season under his belt, because he came into the squad a little late as well in the summertime because of the transfer and all that kind of thing, and then he didn't get many games before he got injured against Leicester. So again with him, possibly Callum, and there's a few others. I mean, I've mentioned Benicophobia a few times as well. We may not see the best of them until next season. There's always a chance that any player can get injured at any time, but luckily we've got a cushion now going to the end of the season, worrying about things like that as opposed to worrying about cobbling the points together to stave off relegation. And it was the goal that we scored in the 74th minute that kind of confirmed ultimately our survival in the Premier League, as if it was. Well, it hasn't been in doubt for quite a while now, for at least about a month. But it's always nice to get that little bit of confirmation. And this, as they said, exactly what I thought. They said this on Match of the Day last night. It just summed up Villa's season, or I imagine it did. They conceded we conceded a throw, and I think Matt Ritchie put the ball out, and they were about midway inside their own half, Villa. And Sissoko took the throw in. He threw it back to Westwood. Westwood then just played the return ball to Sissoko, and then he inexplicably drilled the ball back to Kieran Clark, and Clark was the one who got hammered in the analysis I saw. But it was actually, he was played into trouble by Sissoko. The ball was a little away from him. He had to stretch to try and get it. King, who's the quickest player in our team, was like breathing down his neck in a flash, and it all came from that totally unnecessary backwards pass from Sissoko, didn't it?
It was an unnecessary backward pass in the context of Aston Villa's confidence and ability levels. But it's the type of pass that we play on a regular basis to getting ourselves out of a trouble, moving the play across the field from left to right, often passing back in that position to Cook or to Daniels and moving it forward from there. So Clark should have dealt with it, but fair play to King. He closed him down, a bad touch, and before he knew it, King was onto it. He couldn't even bring King down, despite the fact that he tried. And King finished it well. And it was a relief because whilst we didn't know it at the time, 2-0 did become vital for that gap to sustain the opportunity to win the game. Yeah,
King did really well once he'd nicked the ball from Clark. It was a lovely that little that little dink over Guzan, who came rushing out and actually. Well, I thought he fouled him, but it didn't matter because the ball went in. It reminded me of that goal, that famous goal Michael Thomas scored for Arsenal in that game against Liverpool many years ago. The way he lifted it over him so coolly. In fact, I said to my 2 young sons, watch how he puts his foot and pulls it over, gets it under the ball when we watched it this morning. Because it was, very, very coolly done.
It was.
And he, with that goal, he now, he draws level with Callum Wilson in terms of league goals. He's 1 goal ahead of Wilson in total goals. He's now on 6 for the entire campaign. But
and Cook's on 4 league goals now.
Yeah, Cook's on 4, level with Afobe. So there's a little top scorer contest going on. Some of whom you wouldn't expect to be in there, like Cook and Wilson, because he's not played since he played yesterday, but since I think it was the end of September. But I mean, the telling thing about those statistics in King's case is that he scored 5 goals in 3 seasons at Blackburn, and he's obviously gone through quite an upward trajectory in terms of his performances and his appreciation of his performances by our fans this season. I always think back to pre-game press conferences a few months ago when Eddie Howe said the best is yet to come from Josh King, Eddie Howe said. And, he couldn't have been more right, could he?
No, he couldn't. And I heard an interview with Eddie whereby he was asked by somebody who was the best player that he'd ever recruited. And he quoted a Burnley player, I can't remember, Rodriguez, I think, because of his technical ability. And I think that's what he sees in Joshua King. And then it's just a question of coaching the right positional play and the right place in the tactical structure into a player, and then maximising their pace and building their confidence and bringing out the types of performance that we've seen from Joshua King. Because against in the early part of the season, and I'm thinking back to the Villa game, the very first game of the season, where, by the way, we conceded from a corner from Gusted, so another set piece goal. But King's touch was just shockingly poor. But now he has impressed and got the goals to back up his speed and hassling of the opposition's defence. So it must come down to the coaching. There's few players that have arrived at Bournemouth and been under Eddie's coaching and his coaching team's tutelage that have failed to improve themselves.
I think if they're prepared to buy into it, which most of them are, there might be 1 or 2 exceptions, but if they're prepared to buy into it, it almost invariably leads to an improvement in their game. And King's another example of that. I saw him. I don't know if it was on the highlights I saw on the BBC or maybe on an internet dodgy clip that I saw somewhere. After he emerged from a little ruck of players he was celebrating with, kissing the badge. I don't think I've ever seen a Bournemouth player kiss the badge before. I normally think it means that they're... whenever I see a player kiss the badge on the TV, I think, right, they'll probably be off to some other club in the next transfer window. I think we can assume that Josh King won't be leaving in the summer. But, I mean, it was... it looks done and dusted then, didn't it? But we just gave Villa a little bit of hope with their goal, didn't we?
We did, and that sort of came out of nothing as well. A bit like our goal, second goal came out of nothing. It came out of one of Villa's mistake, as you've outlined. But when our Ayew suddenly shot and it seemed to go under Boritz and it was in the net, I thought, well, hold on, what happened there? How did he get into that position? And watching it back again with the benefit of when you see it live, you think, well, what happened? He just shot and he scored, but. He wasn't closed down quickly enough. He took it early. He therefore surprised Boritz most certainly. But Tommy did look as if he could have done a bit better to get the block in. But that may well come down to lack of match practice on his part.
I again saw this on a grainy internet clip, and I think it was the aforementioned Josh King, who I've just been heaping praise on, who lost the ball to Garner in the midfield, and he just played a little short pass to Ayew. And like you said, Ayew didn't really seem to do a lot, but he twisted Tommy Elphick and he cut inside. Boris was off his line, and I don't know how much blame Boris would carry for this, but I think he might have got to it had he been on his line. I wouldn't be saying this, of course, if he'd got a hand to it, but it wasn't that far away from him, but clearly didn't expect it. But
it wasn't too dissimilar to one of the goals that we conceded against West Ham when we were, I think, at that point 4-2 up, or their third goal anyway, where it sort of went under him through the middle of the goal, and the guy took it very early. Boric was a long way off his line and just seemed to be wrong-footed when it's central to him, and he's off that line, and it goes close to him. Apart from that, I think he's had a good season as well. But having said that, I don't know what his contract situation is at this season's end. But to recruit probably a quality backup goalkeeper, or even a first team goalkeeper, and another midfielder will be essential for us to sustain that Premier League presence through next season.
Yeah, I can't see Eddie not wanting Boris to stay and to start next season. The relationship between the goalkeeper and the defence is so important, and whilst he's had a few moments this season where it's fair to say he hasn't been at his best, overall
Spurs to name but one. Spurs at home,
Watford just before that as well. But overall he's made some important saves and done a good job, and he's obviously got a reasonably effective relationship with the back four, and changing that, well, it's always a little bit of a risk, but yeah, I think he'll, if he's fit, I'd expect him to be under contract and starting our first game next season. You never know, but that's what I'm expecting to happen. After we conceded that goal, and we'll come on to the Callum Wilson cameo in a moment, was there any more scares for us?
No, not that I can recall at all. There just wasn't the quality on the field for Villa. You can only probably name Ayew as being a player of any decent quality on that was showing in their colours. Nobody else springs to mind at all in any part of the field.
No, we've been much better this year, or we've been good this year anyway, at seeing games out. Whereas there was a time, and it doesn't seem like that long ago, that we would be on the back foot and just be doing this kind of Alamo type defending when we were clinging on to a 1-goal lead, particularly away from home, but even at Dean Court. And then I guess half the time the opposition would score, thus losing us points. I noticed a few times this season we've just seen games out, the ones that spring to mind are Chelsea away, United at home, Southampton at home, and obviously it sounded like it went all right yesterday, with very little fuss, haven't we?
We have, absolutely. And I wouldn't be qualified enough to put a reason on why that's happened in the Premier League, but it didn't always happen in the Championship. But no, you're absolutely right. Everton apart, where obviously they scored a late goal to what looked like the winner for them. I don't think we've conceded late on this season, apart from when it didn't matter, i.e. Man City scoring their fourth a couple of weeks ago. But when it mattered, we've held tight, Everton apart.
Long may that continue.
Yeah. One of the things that reminded me slightly of the performance yesterday was when we went away in the first Championship season, last game of the season, and it didn't matter to us, and against Millwall, and it mattered to Millwall. And Millwall really needed a result from that game, but they really showed some passion and some effort, and they did get the result. And and we weren't at it, as is the football parlance from managers like Ian Holloway. And yesterday, Villa just weren't at it. They have given up the fight, and were they at it a little bit more, we may have been exposed.
Yeah, it's a sorry state of affairs, and we've already discussed it at Villa Park. But well, more than happy to add another nail to their coffin in one sense. In another sense, it's never nice to see any football club go. Well, not just go down, but go down in the way they have. I mean, the highlight of their season must have been, and I'm sure they wouldn't have thought this at the time, must have been beating us on the very first day. Everything. I remember Tim Sherwood coming on the pitch, punching the air. They just lost in the cup final. They'd turned their form around a little bit under him at the end of the previous season. And they must have thought, everything was rosy. And we were thinking, we're in for a long, hard struggle here. And well, we have had a hard struggle in some respects, but now there's 5 games to go, and it'd be an absolute, whatever the opposite of a miracle is, but a miraculous development if we were to go down. And Villa have just had an absolute nightmare. Now we scored
in their cup final team, of course, as well. They had Delph, Cleverley, and Benteke. And if you lose 3 quality players like that in your pre-season, then yes, you've got to recruit, and they didn't recruit.
No,
enough. Yep.
No, Randy Lerner, he zipped up his wallet and said, no.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember Tony Pulis saying on that Radio 5 Live event at the Dean Court pre-season that Bournemouth will be in a mini league of 8 to 10 clubs, and the trick is to finish midway or above midway in that 10 club mini league. As it stands at the present moment in time, you could say we're top of that 10 club mini league in 11th position, but thankfully we're well and truly out of that bottom 3.
Yeah, it's a very nice feeling, which has been keeping me spring in my step ever since the final whistle yesterday. Just the thought that, especially when Sunderland lost to Leicester today, that it's virtually impossible for us to go down now. I think Sunderland are 18 points behind us, and they're 14 points behind us, and there's 18 points to play for them. They've played a game less than us, and you just don't see them or whoever else is down there winning enough games to catch us. Even at the end of the game yesterday, Eddie Howe the pictures I saw, was more animated than I've ever seen him. He wasn't even that animated when we won the league at Charlton. He was for once he let his excitement momentarily overtake him. He clearly thought, when he looked down the list of fixtures, like Watford, Swansea, Southampton was a bit of a bonus, games to win, and then obviously City and Tottenham, we might not get anything there. It turned out we didn't. Villa, we have to win that one. He clearly thought, we have done it. I mean, it was obvious from his body language, wasn't it?
It was, and again the post-match celebrations with all of the players and the squad, and you could tell from the interaction of the players with each other that was it. Goal achieved, bonuses will be paid. We're going to be Premier League players next year, next season, and yes, that was the turning. That they had crossed the line, although psychologically, again, that 38 points. The 3 of the guys, Sermon, Ritchie and Cook, were on goals on Sunday, weren't they, after the Swansea?
I think they regret that now, don't they?
Well, probably do, yes. But there was an air of, we're there. But definitely after that one on the pitch there yesterday, it was well and truly secured. Secured.
West Ham went down on 42 points in 2003, which is the highest ever. We've got 41 points. We've got 5 games left. We're going to get more than 42 points. So,
and Norwich and Sunderland have got to play each other.
Yeah, and it's next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yes, we can enjoy the rest of the season. Now, despite us scoring 2 goals and winning the game yesterday, the highlight was Callum Wilson's 90 seconds, or whatever he was, whatever amount of time he spent on the pitch. I know it wasn't long. What you don't see when you don't go to the match is the circumstances and what the crowd are like and all that kind of thing before
something like this happens, and I'd imagine most of the fans were on Callum Wilson watch or had half an eye on him throughout the game, and certainly towards the end when they thought, well, there's a chance he might come on. So there must have been a serious amount of excitement and the singing of the Callum Wilson song in the sort of minute 30 seconds before he actually came on the pitch.
He stood up to come on, and a few of us spotted it, and then the ball went out of play. It may have gone for a corner or a goal kick, but they didn't take that opportunity to inform the linesman, to inform the referee that we were waiting for Callum to come on. So he had to wait another couple of seconds, and then it did eventually happen. And then, yes, the Callum Wilson song rang out, and I've seen him interviewed and sort of admit that there was a bit of a lump in his throat as it happened. And being a lad from the Midlands, he will have played against Villa youth teams and probably at Villa Park more than once. And obviously he scored in the FA Cup late on for us at Villa Park last season. And it would have been poignant for him to make that comeback at that ground earlier than anticipated.
And did he touch the ball when he was on the pitch?
Well, he almost touched it straight away. It sort of flicked off a Villa defender and it flicked off him, so he didn't get the chance to bring it under control. And then it bounced back in his direction again. So within the first 15 seconds, he almost touched it twice. And then 70 seconds later, the whistle went. So no, he sadly didn't really make an impact. But I said to those around me, I said, had he been brought on 75 minutes, such is the fairy tale that lies behind, Bournemouth and also Callum Wilson, that in those 15 minutes, I'm sure he would have got a chance and he would have scored.
Oh yeah, we've got that to look forward to. I thought it was good management by Eddie Howe to bring him on. To bring him on late certainly was a good idea, not to really expose him to any fierce tackles, although Villa could have got back in it technically, but it doesn't sound like they were able to actually do anything to put themselves in that position. But also, if the thing about Murray getting injured and therefore that accelerating Wilson's place on the bench is true, then Eddie could have just left him on the bench. He could have brought someone else on, or he could have just left it altogether. But he brought him on, and that, of course, then ends his wait to get back onto the pitch, and also ends the speculation about when will he be back, because that's all done now. And although he only played for 90 seconds or whatever, and he doesn't sound like he touched the ball, maybe he did, but that's all kind of done and dusted now. So although it'll be a bigger thing when he starts a game and obviously when he scores, it's good that a lot of what he's been waiting to achieve in those 90 seconds was achieved, wasn't it?
It was, and he's got the chance now to probably get many more minutes in against the Liverpools and the Chelseas and the Evertons and the Man Uniteds at Old Trafford. And the dream of any kid that wants to be a professional footballer is to play in the Premier League and to play against the biggest clubs in English football. And he hasn't had the chance to do that apart from the Liverpool game in the early part of the season because of his injury, and now he's going to get the chance to do that, and probably also get the chance to retain that top scorer status for another season. Because it would be nice to see him get 3 or 4 before the end of the season and roll on to 9 or 10 goals and be top scorer.
I would love it if he got 3 or 4 goals before the end of the season. That'd be fantastic.
I'm sure he'll be expecting that. Liverpool at home, 1 there. Chelsea at home, maybe 1 there. Everton away, yeah, possibly. West Brom at home, couple. United away, maybe. Yeah, you could get 5 or 6 before the end of the season.
You're talking me into it. I'm going straight down to bookies in the morning to spend the meagre winnings that I got from the Grand National this weekend. Well, Gary, I'm glad that it all worked out, because we've kind of been
keeping our powder dry over this Wilson one for quite a while, and as I said before, you were adamant in some respects that this was the podcast you wanted to come on, and you must have contacted me about, feels like before Christmas, and say that's the one when Wilson's coming back, so I want to come on and do that podcast. So thanks ever so much for coming on the show tonight, and hopefully your optimism about Callum Wilson and his getting into double figures for the season will work out. So thanks a lot. And
thank you, Michael. All the best.
Great stuff there from Gary, and I hope our tremendous first season in the top flight has more than compensated for the now traditional disappointments at the Ricoh Arena. Liverpool are up next to the court, and let's hope we can add them to our list of illustrious victims this season. So up the cherries in all departments, and goodbye. The White's Bear Micropub on Southbourne Grove is a proud supporter of AFC Bournemouth and sponsor of all departments. Head to the Bear for real ales, locally produced food, and plenty of good conversations about the cherries. Check out www.thewhitesbear.co.uk.